Now, the other day, as many of you have probably already seen, Lucasfilm put out an official poster that showed Grogu along with Luke building a lightsaber together, and presumably for the little guy to wield during his training. After all, talent without training is nothing, as Luke himself said in The Mandalorian. It's not like you could just expect anyone with the Force to be able to quickly and easily learn to wield it without training, and then go on to, I don't know, defeat a dark side user or something. But seriously here, though this is an official release or product, technically it isn't meant to allude to anything in particular. Or so at least says Russell Walks, the creator of it, who said he basically was given creative freedom to do what he wanted and doesn't know what Lucasfilm's official plans for these two characters are. But come on, and absolutely no offense towards him, I do think it's an incredible piece. But we all know what Lucasfilm and Disney plan to do with these characters. We know we are going to see these two together again. We're going to see Luke training Grogu at some point, and probably much sooner rather than later. There's just way too much money to pass up here. You don't pass up pairing arguably the most popular character of a previous generation with the most popular of the current one, not to mention easily the most beloved and financially profitable Star Wars character created under the Disney banner thus far. This is only a question of when exactly it happens and what form it ultimately takes, with a series on Disney Plus linked in with everything we see going on with The Mandalorian being the most likely and logical choice for it. I mean, we even recently learned that Lucasfilm hired a YouTuber by the name of Shamook to be a senior facial caption artist, after he, by himself in his proverbial basement at home, gave us a much better or truer looking version of young Luke at the end of The Mandalorian, a better version than who knows how many people working at a multi-billion-dollar company gave us. In other words, he seems like just the type of guy you'd want to hire if you planned on using a young-looking Luke Skywalker a lot more, and wanted to do it as efficiently and as cheaply as possible, and for it to look as good as possible as well. After all, selling young Luke will be one of the hardest parts of any series using him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being in it a bit more sparingly, if there aren't other characters besides Grogu that the show will also focus on as Luke builds his new Jedi Order. That's probably what any show with the two in it would be about. But of course there are some inherent problems with such a series, like us knowing pretty much exactly how it has to end, more or less, thanks to the sequel trilogy. We know it all ends in flames, literally. We know, or at least we were told, none of his students survived that, or rather, we were told that some did survive but went off with Kylo and presumably became the Knights of Ren. Or so we thought at the time, or after The Force Awakens, where we heard all that. A more recent comic series actually shows that the students who went with Kylo actually went after Kylo in order to stop him, but they were killed, and that the Knights of Ren are something different altogether, something that existed before Kylo and were essentially taken over by him. There's also then another sort of problem or contradiction here, created by The Mandalorian actually, because in The Last Jedi, Luke says he took Ben along with a dozen students and started a training temple. Now elsewhere in the new canon, we learn Ben's training started around the age of 9, but at the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian, when Luke takes Grogu, Ben would only be around the age of 4 or 5, because we're somewhere around 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, and Ben was born a year after those events. Now, sure, they could easily say Ben's training started earlier than stated in canon. It's not like we haven't seen books and comics already started to be retconned. There almost seems to be a they're canon until we need to change something about them approach when it comes to the books and comics. Regardless, when Luke comes and takes Grogu, I think it's implied rather heavily that he's about to go and train him. He again, after all, says that knowledge without training is nothing, so of course he's going to train him. So then for Luke's words in The Last Jedi to make sense, that means Ben would have to have begun his training around the age of 4 or 5 actually, and Grogu would have to be one of those dozen or so students he took with him. And I don't know, that seems pretty young for Luke to be worried about Ben's mighty Skywalker blood, as also stated in The Last Jedi. Or perhaps Grogu's training was something different and separate from all of this. Which is certainly possible, but leads to the question of, where is Grogu? What happens to him? In fact, even independent of all this, or trying to figure out the exact timing of all this, one still has to wonder, where is Grogu during the sequel trilogy? I mean, there's no way Ben or Kylo has killed him, virtually none at all. Not that I don't think he could murder him or something in story, but out of story, there's no way Disney would let something happen to their golden ticket. he has some ultra thick plot armor made from the plastic and plush of all the toys this character has and will continue to sell. Not to mention, we know Kylo does ultimately end up being redeemed, and the quickest way to ruin that redemption would be to have him be the one who killed Grogu. There's no coming back from that. Plus, there's also the potential for Grogu to live some 900 years in story and show up in all sorts of projects down the road or set in the future of the canon. So there is just no possible way Kylo Ren killed Grogu or that anything else has happened to him. He has to be out there doing something somewhere during the sequels. And yeah, they could go with he survived another temple attack and is in hiding again and will now be found by Rey, who will train him more. But that really doesn't make much sense, because how much training does Grogu need? He's going to be around the age of 80 by the end of the sequel trilogy, and had who knows how many years of training at the original Jedi Temple on Coruscant during the prequel era, plus more training under Luke. Certainly he's good to go at this point, right? Certainly he's a full-on Jedi by now. So again, where is he? He has to still be alive and out there with more training than ever, and thus making the name The Last Jedi not make too much sense. But then again, maybe he just gave up on the Jedi too. Everyone would just love that after the incredible journey we watched him go through with the Mandalorian, and to be found by Luke at the end of it. We'd love to know he also said, screw it, the Jedi need to end. But seriously, they wouldn't do that. Not again. Not after the great setup we had at the end of The Mandalorian. It's right up there with how good of a setup we got in The Force Awakens, actually, with Rey handing Luke's old lightsaber back to him, a pleading expression on her face to help. And though maybe Rey wasn't fantastic in that movie, though I'd argue her introduction and first third of the movie was near perfect, actually, there's a reason why for 2 years Rey parent theories were the big thing, and why people couldn't wait to see what happened next between her and Luke until it literally got thrown away. And that reason is because, yes, it was an actually really good setup. And so there's just no way that happens again. No way they get it wrong again. Not if they let Favreau and Filoni work their magic, at least, which I absolutely think they will. The only question is, how much magic will they be allowed to work? Would they even go so far as to let them do a new version of the sequel trilogy? Could that actually happen? And yes, I know there are many out there who steadfastly believe that cannot and will not ever happen, and I tend to lean in that direction actually, but mainly because I view Star Wars as something different from anything else in entertainment. Something that stands apart and is sacred somehow, and of course they'd never undo the movies in any way, even though Lucas himself had done that. But then I remind myself that Disney itself has no such reverence for Star Wars, and that we have a general audience out there who is used to this sort of thing happening already, who have seen plenty of reboots and remakes, and who likely also don't have any sort of reverence for Star Wars either. In other words, as I've said before, if Disney thinks there's a large profit to be made from redoing the sequel trilogy, then they'll absolutely consider it and possibly do it. And the biggest thing holding them back just might be the negative media reaction, that it'll be seen as giving into the haters or the toxic fandom. In fact, that might be one of the only things holding them back from ever doing it. Another sort of issue around this is what's going to happen with Kathleen Kennedy. Her current contract expires next month, and so far no word either way on whether she's going or staying. Now, I've predicted before that she's going to be gone, that she will say she's stepping aside to pursue other things, though I think she sticks around long enough to help see Indiana Jones 5 finished. But she'll say when she leaves that she's given her all to Star Wars and ushered it into a new era, but now it's time for someone else to take it further. She will then, of course, be thanked and celebrated by Disney on her way out, despite how they may or may not feel about her and the job she's done behind closed doors, and whether or not they're sort of forcing her out. Either way, if in the near future her sequels are retconned, it'll be seen, mainly by the media and some fans, as a slap in the face to her, that they are removing her one big contribution to the Star Wars canon. This is another thing that might hold them back from ever doing this, because again, you're going to have quite the negative reaction from some in the media. The other big problem would of course be angering the fans who do enjoy the sequels, and yes, there are plenty of them out there, and as I always say, it's fine if you like those movies. I've got no problems with you, and we don't have to hate each other because we disagree over a couple movies, especially when we should be able to look past that and at our shared love and appreciation for Star Wars itself. People can disagree and still act rationally towards one another. It can even still be friends, a radical concept in today's world, I know. And so if we did get a new version of the sequel somehow, I think you'd have to be careful about what you do with the current version. I think you'd have to find a way to not exactly overwrite them, but to somehow include them and keep them a part of the story and part of the canon, and to honor and respect those films and the people who enjoy them, as well as the characters in them. I'm not a fan of seeing other fans pissed off just for the sake of seeing others made happy, if that makes sense. What I'm even going to try and do with my next weekly fan fiction series, which will either start tomorrow or Wednesday, is create a story that does just that, that keeps the sequels as part of the canon, yet tells a new story over them. And if you're curious about how I'll do that, well, you'll have to watch and see. Anyway, to start to wrap this up, I do think Lucasfilm and Disney have sort of cornered themselves with Grogu, though it's probably not a problem they're too upset about having, because as I keep saying, there's so much potential for money to be made. And for better or worse, that's what really matters to them. Some of us might view Star Wars as something special, and don't get me wrong, I think it is. But for those who own it, it's a means by which to make money. And if they think they can redo the sequels in a way that doesn't anger too many fans or draw too much negative press their way, if they think they can make a whole lot of money again, well, why wouldn't they do that? What's stopping them in this day and age of remakes and reboots, an age where, again, the general audience has, for better or worse, come to accept and expect just that sort of thing? Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Could you see the sequels being overwritten or redone, or is that something Disney would never ever do? Whatever you think, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.